Good morning. In this very strange situation, here is the first of our presentations for the ASLS Schools Conference 2020. I don't know where you'll be watching this, don't know how you'll be watching this, but I hope we are watching it. One of the things we wanted to do at the beginning of this Schools Conference was to address the issue of the preparedness of English teachers to teach Scottish literature in schools. And so this is going to be a two-part presentation. I'm starting off, I'm Maureen Farrell from the University of Glasgow. I'm from the School of Education and I'm a teacher educator. And then my colleague, Professor Alan Reach, is going to take on and talk specifically about Scottish literature curriculums. So what I want to try and do today is to tell you exactly what training and what the expectations are for people coming into teaching in Scotland at this time. So I want to look at the initial teacher education preparation of secondary English teachers. I'm going to look at review their exposure to Scottish literature as part of their training. And then I'm going to consider some of the implications for the teaching of Scottish literature. So there's a memorandum that gives you the requirements that you need in order to become a teacher. And that comes from the Scottish Government and is managed by the General Teaching Council of Scotland. So to become a teacher in Scotland, there are certain requirements. At a basic level, they have to have a national qualification in English at SCQF 6. So that's higher English or equivalent. And this is new actually, or relatively new, even for English teachers, you have to have a qualification in mathematics at SCQF level 5, for example, National 5, Credit Standard Grade or Intermediate 2. So that gets you into an undergraduate programme with that. But then when you want to become a secondary teacher, you have to have an undergraduate degree validated by a university in the United Kingdom, or an undergraduate degree of an equivalent standard from outside the UK. Now this is where it gets a bit complicated and you have to think carefully about how it's presented. It then says that you have to have, the undergraduate degree should normally contain 80 SCQF points relevant to the teaching qualification or qualifications being studied. Now what the heck is that? The Scottish Credit and Qualifications Framework. Now, nowadays, we have a framework right from S1 all the way up to doctoral level. And they are looking at every course at university is given credit points based on, wait for it, notional student effort. Now, let's not even go into what that actually means, but just to get you an idea, and it's to do with the number of hours on the course. So you have to have 80 credits in the subject that you want to teach. And of those, 40 credits have to have been studied at level 8 or above. Now, level 8 is the equivalent to second year of university. So to teach a subject, you have to have studied the subject up to at least second year at university. Then when we go on to look at the specific requirements for English teachers, all undergraduates have to have an undergraduate degree with at least 80 credit points in English. And then there's a specification. They have to have 40 of them in literature. Now, they don't specify what that means. That could include English literature or Scottish literature. It could be English in translation. So you could look at, you can also look at American literature, you can look at Canadian literature, you can look at Spanish literature in translation, you can look at Scandinavian literature in translation, and so on. And then they also have a specification that says a maximum of 20 SCQF points in media studies. Now, the intriguing thing for me is that nowhere is there a specification about language. There's no requirement to do English language. There's no requirement to do Scottish language. And when they say those English in translation or English literature and so on, there's no specification of the nature of what they mean by literature. They've got to do 40 of them in literature. So we've had students come through with courses called things like Ways of Reading, which might be about critical studies. It might be something to do with literary frameworks, and it could be all kinds of different things. It can be people can come in with qualifications looking at comics and graphic novels. I have no problem with that myself, but it's the generality of what they're asking of the degree. And then, of course, you have to have the postgraduate diploma in education, the secondary qualification. So that's when I get my hands on them. That's when they come to do their one-year postgrad qualification. And let's think about exactly what this entails. Now, many of you will have gone through this course or equivalent, but just to let you know exactly what is required. The course is of 36 weeks duration, of which 18 weeks happens in the university and 18 weeks happens out in placement. Now, the way most of our universities work is that there are 3 blocks of placement, usually 6 weeks each. And certainly the way my university, Glasgow University, and I know Strathclyde University work is that we do the first placement in one school and normally have a short block of kind of orientation of a couple of weeks and then a block of 6 weeks. But because of this year and because of all the different arrangements, because of the COVID-19 and things like that, we're not having this sort of short block, but they have 6 weeks in one school. And then in February, they start their second 6 weeks. And then after Easter, they return to the same school for their final 6 weeks. And the rest of the time, the other 18 weeks is split in the university. So we have them for quite a long block in semester 1 before they go out to school. Then I have them for 4 weeks in January, and then they go back out to school. And then I pretty much don't see them again until they finish. So as you can imagine, their time with us is quite curtailed. Now, I can only speak for my university, and I don't know what the courses are in some of the others, but just to give you an idea, we have three main courses. There's something called Understanding, Learning and Teaching, which is the general theoretical principles. There's Curriculum Education, which is the specialist subject of English. And then there is Practitioner Inquiry, which of course is now a huge thing for teachers, looking at investigating your own classroom practice and how that impacts on your teaching. So even within those 18 weeks that we have them, only a proportion of that is spent with your curriculum subject. And what we have to do is we have to take something like, at the moment I think we've got 36 students, we have to take 36 disparate students coming from a whole range of different courses, and we have to stuff their heads full of the knowledge they need in order that they can deliver the secondary curriculum in English. So we don't really have time to do much curriculum content knowledge. We're teaching them about the structure of the courses, the course requirements, how do you set up lessons, how do you do lesson planning, what kind of assessment strategies do you need to use, all of those kinds of things. And we have to trust that what they've learned in their undergraduate degree in their subject discipline will give them with the tools with which they can research the content that they have not yet come across in their degree programmes. And then at the end of that, if they manage to successfully complete that, if they want to go on and make their original certificate into a master's degree, to complete the master's element, they have to do a research methods course and a dissertation, and that has to be completed within 5 years of their first qualification. It sounds like an awful long road to get to where I really want to be, and this is where I really want to be at the moment. But I think it's really good for you to see what you can anticipate your new teachers will have experienced when they come into your department. Let's look now at the implications for teaching Scottish literature. It's quite possible that newly qualified English teachers could have no Scottish literature in their undergraduate degree. It's quite possible that their knowledge of Scottish literature will be based on what they remember of what they were taught in schools. Now, for those recent graduates, they will have a required Scottish literature element. They will have done the set texts that we've been talking about for the last 5 or 6 years, and they will have some knowledge. But even then, we know from the SQA that some of the selections, although there's a selection of texts, oftentimes it comes down to quite a narrow range of texts. But we don't always have people coming into teaching straight from university. We've got people who did their degrees 15, 20 years ago, when there may not have been that requirement to do Scottish literature. So they may not have encountered any Scottish literature when they were at school. And if they come from Firth of Scotland, they will be highly unlikely to have any knowledge of Scottish literature. And as for Scottish language, and I would say that is true of almost all of our students, they've got very little knowledge of Scottish language. And when you ask them if they can speak Scots, they mostly say no until you actually tell them to do something using Scots language, like "O ston up," "O put your hands in your head," and they suddenly are able to do it, and they suddenly think, "Oh, hang on, I can do that." But you've no idea how much I have to work to get them to understand that Scots is not a dialect, that it's a language. And those are people who are generally quite well disposed to Scottish literature and language. And when it gets to the PGDE programme, because of the pressure of time, because we have to cram in so much, if they do not have an interested and committed tutor in their postgraduate diploma in education, someone who's interested in Scottish literature and language, again, it's very unlikely that they will have any dedicated Scottish literature input. And so that's where I think some of the problem lies, is that if we want to make Scottish literature much more central in our curriculums, if we want to make people much more knowledgeable, if we want to generate enthusiasm for the qualification, then we have to actually produce interested, engaged, enthusiastic teachers of Scottish literature, and that means they have to be knowledgeable. And so I suppose here I'm suggesting to you that when those new teachers come into you, if Scottish literature and language is an important element in your school and in your department, then you might have to do a certain degree of upskilling with those students or with those beginning teachers when they come in. I feel as if I've been on my soapbox a wee bit here, but I'm sorry, I don't make any bones about that. I do feel quite strongly about this, and I think it's something that we all need to consider if we really want to make Scottish literature and language go from strength to strength. Now I'm going to finish here, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague Alan Rioch, and he's going to take you through a bit more of what happens when you do a degree in Scottish literature. Thanks very much for your attention. I hope you've found this helpful.